It is in Europe and America that most psychological research has been done. As a result, many of the findings of modern psychology are very Eurocentric. What is normal and what is abnormal is dominated by European and American ideas. More recently, the field of cross-cultural psychology has emerged, and it has looked at how psychology may differ from culture to culture in terms of what is considered normal and what is considered abnormal. Cross-cultural psychologists typically divide the world into two different kinds of cultures: individualistic cultures and collectivistic cultures. They argue that Europe and America are primarily individualistic cultures, and most Asian and African societies tend to have more collectivistic cultures. What are some of the differences between individualistic cultures and collectivistic culture? Individualistic culture does not stress the role of the family. The family is there. There are very good parenting practices, but most parenting practices are focused on creating independence in the child. You would find 7-year-olds, 9-year-olds, 10-year-olds doing chores and are being given some money as a payment for those chores. It is not that the parents are using child labor. That's not the case. Most parents do that so that children realize the value of money and that they realize that they can actually make their own money. And that creates a sense of independence. In our societies, it is generally looked down upon for a child to work for money, especially in the middle classes. Let's take another example. An 18-year-old typically goes to the university in America. Chances are that person is never going to return to their family home, to live, that is. So during my stay at America, I realized that most people who were studying with me after graduation would go on to get jobs far away from their homes. They would probably live in a flat, get married, spend the rest of their lives totally far away from where they originated. Yes, most of them would return to meet their parents over Christmas once a year, but not all of them do. A big difference from a country like Pakistan and India, where you could be 40 years old and the chances are your parents are living with you or you are living in their home. And that is not considered something unusual. But in America and in Europe, people would mock you and say, you still live with your parents. What kind of a man are you? Or what kind of a woman are you? Then there's a huge gender difference among cultures. In many Eastern societies, women play a more domestic role than men. Whereas in many European and American societies, women tend to have the same role as that of a man in terms of being a breadwinner, in terms of looking after their homes and so on, and there's not much difference. What is normal in one culture could be abnormal in another. Another very important difference in value systems between individualistic cultures and collectivistic cultures is the respect for the elderly. Traditionally, in the Eastern societies, the older you are, the more important you are considered in terms of jobs, in terms of respect, in terms of experience, wisdom, and so on. Whereas in individualistic societies, youth is given a higher premium. So if you are over 50, you may be very, very experienced. Chances are that if you're fired from your job, you're very, very unlikely to get another job. But if you're in your 20s and your 30s, you may hop from one job to the other, and there won't be a problem. Whereas in India and Pakistan, in China, even in Japan, and in many other Eastern societies, older people and senior people are given a priority over others. They're also treated with great respect, and the youth does not enjoy the kind of premium they enjoy in the Western world. Another very important psychological difference between Eastern and Western cultures is the difference between two emotions. And these are shame and guilt. We all experience shame and guilt. Whether we're living in Europe, America, or in India or Pakistan, we all experience shame at times, and we all experience guilt at times. But cross-cultural psychologists tend to split the world into shame cultures versus guilt cultures. Shame cultures are those where you may be doing something bad over and over again, but without any guilt. As long as nobody finds out, it doesn't matter. But the moment you're caught, you experience shame. And that shame is sometimes considered worse than death. To lose face, as it is called, to be humiliated, is the worst possible thing somebody in an Eastern society can experience. In Japan, people, until very recently, would kill themselves instead of facing shame. A big example of that was the Second World War. At the end of the Second World War, after the second nuclear weapon was dropped on Japan, the emperor begged his soldiers to surrender. Many of them surrendered, but a very large number committed suicide. Because in Japan, to commit suicide is considered better than experiencing shame in front of somebody else. In the Western cultures, I'm not saying that people don't experience shame. Of course they do. But generally, they don't take what others think seriously. So if you try to shame somebody, chances are they wouldn't give you much attention. But their mode of moral self-regulation is guilt and not shame. So somebody who's doing something bad privately and secretly is likely to suffer more psychological harm than they would if they were shamed. If somebody shamed them, they would probably grin and laugh it off. But if they feel bad about it, it's more important for them. So this is another very important distinction that has been made by cross-cultural psychologists in terms of what is considered normal in one culture may be abnormal in another. And that is why it has not been easy to say what is normal and what is abnormal in psychology. If something is normal in one culture and abnormal in another, how could we ever decide? Cross-cultural psychologists argue that to talk of an absolute normal or an absolute abnormal is impossible in psychology because people in different cultures behave differently and there is no absolute standard of what is normal and what is not.